My brother played in a band called the Warriors. I was told by my brother, "Why don't you join the band? We can play some Evelyn Brothers songs." Progressive rock has a distinct flair. It features excellent technical skill, intellectual words, and intricate rhythms. It lacks the explosive strength of Freddy Mercury, the mystery of Peter Gabriel, and the thunder of Ian Gillan. Rather, it is simultaneously male and female, descending from the sky to the earth like a thread of mist. That voice is that of Jon Anderson, the band's soulmate, and a reminder of a musical philosophy that most people today have forgotten. Jon Anderson doesn't rock in the conventional sense. He doesn't sleep with women, trash hotel rooms, become involved in drug problems, or utter sexually suggestive things. He doesn't have a publicity staff, doesn't utilize social media, and isn't interested in becoming famous. In a secular society, he creates art and leads a nomadic monastic life. His voice is like a bell ringing amid the clamor of life. For Anderson, music is more than just entertainment. It is a gateway to incomprehensible universes. In those realms, the listener is no longer a consumer but rather a spiritual trip companion with the ability to fly through dimensions, enter ancient symbols, or simply remain motionless long enough to breathe with the cosmos. However, he was previously regarded as odd, expelled from the band he founded, and referred to as a guy lost in the spiritual labyrinth he created for himself because of his way of thinking. Jon Anderson never engaged in combat. He continued to ponder, write, and sing. What he did next was left to time. What shaped Jon Anderson into the individual he is today? As a child, a poor Lancashire milk delivery guy suffered from asthma. How did he write Awaken, Close to the Edge, and numerous more beloved musicals? And after wandering with music, faith, love, or simply the sound of a child who would never grow up for over 50 years? If you're willing to listen, Jon Anderson's life doesn't need a climax. All you have to do is inhale deeply, look within, and have faith. Early life. On October 25, 1944, Jon Anderson was born in the modest industrial town of Accrington, Lancashire, England. The sky hardly ever saw the sun, and the streets were always covered with coal dust. He was born John Roy Anderson, but in an attempt to feel more liberated and less bound, he later removed the H from his initial name. His name alone was enough to make you feel a piece of him. A guy whose heart, intellect, and entire existence are constantly searching for freedom. He came from a low-income family. His father enjoyed singing Irish folk tunes and playing the mandolin in addition to painting buildings. His mother did everything correctly, was rigorous, and put in a lot of labor. In their little, noisy household with 5 other kids, Jon was the middle child and could only be calmed by one thing: music. Music was the one thing that caused me to pause and pay attention. There was a pink mist that seemed to fill my consciousness. No one else sensed it, but I did. He recalled, when he was a kid, Jon wanted to be a football player. He looked up to Manchester United and even joined a local youth team. But his asthma made that impossible, and I remember him passing out on the field. I felt like I belonged somewhere else that day, and I knew I couldn't play football. Anderson was frequently reprimanded for daydreaming in class, struggled academically, and disliked restrictions. After quitting at the age of 15, he worked as a laborer, a milkman, and finally a cigarette factory worker. He was drawn more into his inner world, which was replete with Celtic mythology, classical music, and metaphysical fantasies, by Lancashire's dull jobs and dark, rainy days. Despite never having taken a music instruction, Jon learned to construct tunes and distinguish tones on his own. I got this sound line in my head and tried to play it however I could, not knowing the chord names. He claimed at the time that music was a spiritual raft he clung to in the choppy seas of life rather than a destination. Perhaps Jon Anderson's lack of education, his illness, or his impoverished upbringing weren't the most remarkable aspects of him. It was his capacity to perceive beauty where others could not. He noticed a shaft of light in the gloomy clouds beyond the manufacturing chimney. He heard the beat of an other planet in the church bells that rang every Sunday morning. He also saw an opportunity to create his own language of sound, light, and soul and his own sense of alienation. Origins. The the Beatles and Rolling Stones music swept over Britain in the middle of the 1960s. A boy from a tiny village named Jon Anderson had thin eyes and a voice that seemed to be dreamily staring up at the sky. Because of his diminutive stature, high-pitched voice, and lack of musical ability, no one believed he would succeed in the glitzy world of rock and roll. Anderson, however, didn't think so. Alongside his brother Tony Anderson, he became a member of the Warriors, a minor beat band, in 1965. The band performed covers anywhere they could earn some cash, including weddings, drinking parties, and nightclubs. The tour ended quietly in disappointment, despite the fact that they traveled to Germany to perform in the hopes of becoming famous. The band quickly disbanded after returning home since no one was interested in the music. Anderson returned to England penniless and jobless. To make ends meet, he took on any job, including moving boxes, cleaning dishes, and serving tables. However, his fortunes began to turn in 1968 in a tiny nightclub in London. He met Chris Squire, a bassist with a distinct technique and a fixation on accuracy, there. They discussed music, the dullness of popular songs, and their ambition to create something fresh by fusing jazz, rock, classical, and even philosophy. They called their band Yes and brought in a guitarist, drummer, and keyboardist. Yes was initially simply another psychedelic rock band in London, so it's simple to understand why Anderson said yes. It's the shortest, most positive word I know. Despite receiving positive reviews, their first album, Yes, 1969, and second album, Time and a Word, 1970, did not perform well. But it was at this point that Anderson began to forge his own style. Unlike most, he did not create lyrics about personal confessions, love, or protest. Rather, he wrote about ancient spirits, astronomy, parallel realms, and crystal vibrations. Some believed it to be absurd. Others ridiculed him by claiming that his lyrics were incomprehensible, but Chris Squire, who firmly believed in Anderson, refused to back down. Bill Bruford, a drummer who had left Oxford to play in Prague, Rick Wakeman's enormous collection of synthesizers, and Steve Howe's amplified classical guitar were added to the group. With its philosophical lyrics and intricate song structures, the band that no one understood was about to revolutionize 1970s music. However, Jon Anderson was still an outsider prior to that heyday. Although he lacked technical and musical talent, he was the driving force behind Yes and guided the band into new frontiers. He was a man with only dreams and no weapons. Roundabout, an odd 8-minute song with an acoustic guitar played backwards and a bassline that sounded like it originated from another planet, launched the album Fragile, which was released in the fall of 1971. Jon Anderson's soaring voice blasted out over that bass, destined to fly, with no destination or explanation. Yes was now formally in its prime. The 3 tracks on the 37-minute album Close to the Edge from 1972, which is organized like a multi-movement symphony, are regarded as an indispensable classic of progressive rock. Jon Anderson served as the guide in that ethereal musical realm, guiding us to feel rather than to be comprehended. He composed poetry-like or code-like lyrics. A seasoned witch could call you from the depths of your shame. Close to the Edge was a ritual rather than only a song title. Words only needed to strike the proper chord for Anderson, they didn't need to make sense. Every record was a voyage within himself, and every live performance was a sacred event. He was unlike anyone else in the band, and occasionally he was intolerable. Jon Anderson had an intense obsession with perfection. He composed music using colors rather than notes and required his band members to meditate before recording sessions. In addition, which was highly rare in the rock scene at the time, he abstained from drinking, smoking, and eating meat. However, it was precisely these peculiarities that made Yes so unique, intense and unique, but not marketable or simple to absorb or comprehend. Tales from Topographic Oceans, 1973, the band's masterpiece, had 4 compositions inspired by the Indian Upanishads, each lasting more than 20 minutes. It was ridiculed by the British music press. Audience members shook their heads, but Anderson refused to back down. He believed that music needed to be believed, not comprehended. There was conflict among the group despite Yes becoming a tremendous smash. Rick Wakeman, the flamboyant and defiant virtuoso, and Steve Howe, the technical perfectionist, frequently fought with Anderson, the dreamer. In 1980, Anderson left the band for the first time after a challenging tour and mounting creative pressure, beginning a new project that explored a new age aesthetic. In a few years, he rejoined Yes, left again, and then reunited with old members to form Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, Howe, ABWH, essentially a nameless Yes. The song, Owner of a Lonely Heart, from Yes' 1983 album 90125, which used a more contemporary pop-rock approach, was an unexpected hit. Although the song was a great smash on MTV, Anderson felt that he had sold a piece of his soul to the market, which left him unhappy. Anderson's career was a loop of leaving, coming back, getting back together, and breaking up after that. Every time he returned, he brought a fresh thought, a more abstract idea, and perhaps a sense of estrangement from the band he had founded. Yes continued, but in 2004 Anderson began to distance himself, and in 2008 he was sacked outright. Beyond Yes. A significant aspect of Jon Anderson's career was collaborating with Vangelis, the well-known Greek composer who composed the music for Blade Runner and Chariots of Fire. As the pair Jon and Vangelis, they began collaborating in the late 1970s, creating strange, meditative, and open music. The intricate rock formations were gone. In tracks like State of Independence, I'll Find My Way Home, and The Friends of Mr. Cairo, Anderson's voice floats above Vangelis's manufactured backdrops. Jon didn't have to struggle for creative control or attempt to blend in with a band. This was a secure haven for him. All he could do was sing, breathe, and listen. Today, a lot of musicians are evaluated based on the number of views and shares their music receives, but Jon Anderson ventured into realms of consciousness that few others had the courage to explore. As a result, he remains out of touch with the times and inspires others who still think that music is a better way to live. Conflicts, unrest, and rumors, Jon Anderson was the unwavering core of Yes for many years. He was the only one who regarded the band as a spiritual journey, not because he was the finest guitarist or singer. He created a world in addition to music. Therefore, the people he used to call brothers were the ones who caused the worst fall in his life, not the media or scandal. Jon Anderson was unexpectedly admitted to the hospital in 2008 due to acute respiratory failure while preparing for a new tour with Yes. This time it was worse than his childhood asthma. Doctors advised him to rest for at least a few months because he was unable to breathe or sing. As usual, Anderson interpreted it as a cosmic cue to pause and think. He assumed that the band would wait for him to return, so he informed them that he would be taking a vacation from touring to recuperate. They didn't wait, though. His longtime buddy and Yes co-founder Chris Squire and the other members agreed to go with the tour without him. In addition, they replaced Anderson with a young vocalist named Benoit David. As soon as David took the stage, there was a stir since his voice sounded so much like Anderson's. No formal meeting or explicit announcement was made. In a subsequent interview, Jon's voice trembled as he stated, "I wasn't leaving the band," after learning he had been replaced online. Being abandoned by his musical family seemed like a betrayal, and Anderson has since ceased discussing Yes as a whole. "I was kicked out while I was in the hospital. What a sad thing that was for someone like me who lived by instinct." His relationship with Chris Squire was irrevocably broken, and by the time Squire passed away in 2015, they had never truly reconciled. In addition, Jon had a very personal crisis that few people are aware of. Following his divorce in the early 1990s, he had a long-lasting emotional collapse, according to close friends, during which he drifted between meditation centers, avoided the media, and stopped playing music. At one point, he would sit for hours trying to feel the air, which sparked rumors that he had isolated himself from the outside world, that he was mentally ill, that he believed aliens were speaking to him, and that his long-term lung damage prevented him from performing. Some people, even those who have performed with Jon Anderson, may not fully understand him. Jon laughed softly, as if he was accustomed to being misunderstood, and once responded, "I'm not crazy." When asked about the media calling him crazy, he said, "I don't live the way they want me to." Being misunderstood? That's what happens to individuals who want to get to the heart of things. It's not a tragedy, it's the price of freedom. He never sought to win over everyone to his way of thinking, though, as singing was an honor and being heard was a pleasure. Jon Anderson was so private in real life that he almost didn't seem real. There were no romantic scandals, extravagant weddings, or shocking declarations. To him, love was never a story to be told, but a quiet journey to keep the peace during storms of creativity. Before his career really took off, in 1969, he married Jennifer Baker, who would become his first wife and be by his side during the formative years of Yes. They had 3 children together and led a life that wasn't in the spotlight very often. When asked about his family, Anderson would respond, "She was the place I returned to after flying too far." However, as a dreamer who was constantly thinking about music, philosophy, and faith, it was never easy for him to be a good husband. Anderson lived alone for many years after the divorce, a period of deep meditation, Qigong practice, and inner transformation. For some years, he nearly vanished from public life, with no performances or new albums, instead painting, writing, and doing yoga every morning. Friends recall that during that time, he frequently claimed to be being reborn from within. After 25 years of marriage, there were no public accusations or lawsuits, just 2 people at the end of a journey, both aware that they no longer lived in the same world. In 1997, he met Jane Luttenberger, a singer, artist, and later his second wife. Unlike Jennifer, Jane joined his artistic endeavors, toured with him, meditated with him, adopted minimalism with him, and remained silent when needed. They didn't talk loudly about love, they simply lived it. It's interesting that Jon Anderson's perspective on love remained constant despite their 2 very different marriages. "Love isn't a promise," he said in an interview with Progression magazine. "A frequency exists. When 2 people touch at the correct frequency, everything moves in unison. Once the frequency has wandered, it cannot be recovered." This may have prevented him from disparaging his past, boasting about his present, or praising or criticizing marriage. According to him, love is like music, it doesn't require a beginning or an end. And just as Jon Anderson sings softly, soaringly, and wonderfully, he still loves in the solitude. Legacy and influence. When people think of progressive rock heroes, they typically picture 20-minute songs, laser-lit sets, and virtuoso guitar playing. The memory of Jon Anderson, however, lies not in those ostentatious items but rather in the quiet, in poems as enigmatic as old codes, and in a voice that seemed unreal. Anderson was the guardian of Yes soul for more than half a century. The ethereal, enigmatic light that transported listeners to another planet has vanished, but the band continues to travel and release albums. He was dubbed the gatekeeper of Prague's golden age by many admirers because of this. His belief that music could heal, that lyrics could unlock doors in the human spirit, and that a 20-minute song without a chorus or a catchy hook could nevertheless impact those who were willing to listen were all reasons why he wrote such amazing music. Jon Anderson remained loyal to a style of music that served no one except inner truth, even as the world shifted more quickly toward music driven by the market. His impact extended well beyond Yes. His clean, high voice served as a template for a new wave of progressive vocalists, including Sigur Rós, Johnny, and John Davison, who is currently the main singer of Yes. Critics hailed solo albums such as Olias of Sunhillow as one-man symphonies, in which he composed, organized, sung, and produced entire soundscapes without the aid of a band. He entered an entirely new, illogical, unorganized, and non-commercial realm with Vangelis, where sound served as a conduit between human beings and cosmic energy. Many contemporary electronic composers claim that Vangelis and Jon had a major impact on them, not because of their technical prowess but rather because of their style.